Welcome to The Grand Balance, a weekly podcast hosted by two working grandmas navigating the beautiful chaos of work and family.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are so excited to welcome this week's guest, Nicole Gossler. She is an expert dog trainer, and she has quite the background. She has worked as a trainer at the San Diego Zoo for 16 years, and then she ran the Zoo Express program at the San Diego Zoo, which brought animals to the Children's Hospital and Nursing Home for over 10 years around the San Diego area. She has a degree in wildlife conservation biology, and she has lived in both Costa Rica and Zambia doing rescue and rehabilitation with primates. She's also started her own pet sitting and dog training business, which is how I know Nicole. And I would say she's definitely one of the best out there in both the pet sitting world and the dog training. She specializes in puppies, and I highly recommend her work. So we will talk about that later. But welcome to the podcast, Nicole.
Aw, thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Angela, for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to get some info about bringing dogs into not only our home as grandparents, but also dogs into our children's homes as parents, and all of our listeners' dogs that they have as well.
And I'm excited to hear maybe on another episode or something like Costa Rica, one of my favorite places to visit. And you worked there?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but yes, while I was in college, I went over there and I went to a rehab center and took care of howler monkey babies that had been.
Wow.
So that was really cool. Really neat experience.
Yeah,
Very
sure.
neat.
Nicole has lots of crazy animal travel stories. But
I have some crazy ones.
maybe at the end we'll have a pet sitting confession to entertain our audience.
That sounds good. That's a good idea. All right.
Well, starting out with dogs, the first, I think, question that most people have is when bringing a newborn home, how can that transition go easily as far as bringing the baby home to the parents' home and bringing the baby home into the grandparents' home where there are dogs?
Okay. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about probably could go both ways, right? It could go to either house, but it's really important to, when like before the dog even comes home, to kind of like have a plan for your dog, obviously, like who's going to take care of them. Because I think sometimes people don't think enough in advance of that, because I'm a pet sitter, right? So I know this. Where are the dogs going to go when they're in the hospital having the baby? Who's going to take care of them? But when the baby comes home, a lot of people have this thing about, bringing a baby blanket into the house, bringing clothes from the baby from the hospital. And
we both
it's not
did.
it's
And
fine.
I failed. Remember that? I failed.
Yeah.
No, it's actually, and that's what I was going to talk about. If you fail, it's really not that big of a deal, because what you got to understand is one exposure to the smell is not going to make a huge difference, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like because you didn't bring a baby blanket home, the dog is not going to understand. So there's no harm in it. But you just don't want to like overthink it, but before the dog even comes home, I think a lot of people too don't understand, like, okay, we got to meet the needs of the dogs, right? This dog needs to be well exercised, whether your pet sitter does it, you come home early and do it. When you walk in with a new baby, it's really important that you don't take the baby in the baby carrier. You come in, you set the baby down, and you greet your dogs. Hi, all excited. You don't do that. You should come in. Nope, not a good idea. You come in quietly, you come in separately, and you actually, you want to reduce your dog's excitement and jumping and all that, which I train anyway as a dog trainer. It's ridiculous that people do that to dogs, but you really want to greet with a brand new baby walking into the house the first time. You want to greet the dog separately and really nice and calm. And also when you do finally introduce the baby to the dog, you really don't make a big deal of it. People always are on this thing like, oh, it's a newborn. What do? We got to do all that. No, you don't. You have a lot of months to get, the dog needs to slowly warm up to this baby at a distance. It doesn't need to be face to face with the baby right away. It doesn't need to be curled up with the baby. You know what I mean? So if it comes near you and you have a new baby in your arms, you can just talk to the dog gently and let the dog sniff the baby a little bit. But I see so many people like do these introductions where they come and lay the baby next to the dog, and they try and force it a little bit, right? And then they let the dog come up, or they let the dog come up and climb on top of the couch, curl itself around the baby, and they think that's cute. No, it's not. That's not cute. That's invasion of space. We shouldn't be doing that. Later, that can happen, right? When they have a developed relationship, your dog and the baby's relationship. Things have evolved, but not at the beginning. We teach the dog to respect space.
I think we slow rolled it,
Yeah.
like you said. One of the things we didn't do, the dogs, there were 3 dogs here. My daughter's dog when they were in the hospital, plus the 2 that we have. So I think they wore each other out anyway, just hanging out, inside. But we probably should have walked them before.
Yeah, well, people
introducing the
say
baby.
that, and this goes back to a lot of basic dog training stuff that, a lot of people don't know, but people think dogs wear each other out. No, a lot of times they're just overstimulating each other. That's not enough mental exercise to just let 2 dogs just wear themselves out. That's not good for them. I'm not saying they can't have play sessions during the day, but to make them rely on each other to wear them out. You know what I mean? Whereas getting them some good physical and mental exercise by, letting them take a walk, doing a place training session, things like that. So the other thing that's really important is like having a place, teaching the dog before the baby even comes home. And I do this a lot with people because I do have calls when people are pregnant. They're like, okay, we finally want to fix the dog. We're finally sick of this, this, and this. Well, one of the biggest things I work on with people is before the baby even comes home, is we should place train this dog. And what place training is we teach the dog to go to a spot and relax, right? Instead of the dog invading our space, instead of the dog being under the table when we eat, greeting us at the door all crazy, you teach a dog that it has another behavior it can go do. And we teach the dog that it feels good to go and relax, right? So that takes a little time to condition that response. It doesn't mean, you force a dog into relax and they learn it immediately. It takes some conditioning, but being able to teach a dog, hey, go to your spot. So when you're feeding a baby's in a high chair, things are going on, you can say to a dog, hey, go to your bed. And then the dog goes over to its bed, right? So that's...
We did that when my daughter was pregnant because I was worried about one dog who he lived with 5 baseball players in college. Yeah. So he got to do whatever he wanted. And I was a lot. And so I was worried. We did it. I was the strict one.
Right.
The 2 men in the family were not consistent in the training. Right. It did help. It really did help. But I feel like it's not sticking all the way because of the lax behavior of the parents.
And I will tell you that is the biggest challenge as a dog trainer, whether it's kids involved, babies involved, everyday life that I go to people's houses. I'm going to be honest. It's a lot of moms I'm working with, right? It is dads too. I'm not going to say it's just one-sided, but in a relationship and in these households I go to with these partnerships, there's almost one person always, that's the softie, we call them, or the pushover. And there's always one person who's the one that's like, hey, like we shouldn't be doing this, or I'm going to be more the disciplinarian. And so the dogs figure that out really quickly, right? And it makes for a lot of inconsistencies, and it's more confusing to the dog, I think, than anything.
Yeah, it was very frustrating.
It's very, very frustrating.
And then I tried to get a retraining, and she said it's not going to work because the 2 men in your house aren't following the rules.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll come to people's house and I'll tell them, I'm like, I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to give you guys all the information today. I'm going to do the best I can. But at the end of the day, you both have to be on the same page. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just like kids, actually.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys ask, I know I've talked about with Sharon, is the question about
what are some early signs of stress or discomfort?
Yes, that one. Sometimes the signs of stress in a dog, people think are actually the dog's excited or the dog's happy. Sometimes a wagging tail, a dog jumping up and down and its tail flapping all over is not necessarily a happy dog, right? That's usually an over-aroused, overstimulated dog. Sometimes when a dog is completely over-aroused and overstimulated, it goes to aggression. I'm not saying they're going to attack a child necessarily. The other thing is lip licking. Sometimes the dog will look like it's going to lick the kid, or it is licking the baby or the toddler, or it's licking its lips. No, that's a nervous sign if a dog is licking. Yawning, that's a release of stress. So a lot of times when a dog's yawning, it's not, stress isn't always bad that a dog shows signs of stress. You want to know what these behaviors look like so you can kind of pull back a little bit, right? If the dog's really avoiding eye contact, turning its head away, there's something called whale eye. And that's when you can kind of see the whites, a dog's opening its eyes kind of wide, and you can kind of see the whites of its eyes. The tucked tail or lowered body posture, the dog keeping its head a little bit lower. Again, it might have its head low and be wagging its tail, and people think, oh, it's happy. Well, no, look at the rest of the body. Look at the dog's tail. Look at the dog's shoulders. Are they hunching their shoulders, crouching low? Are they panting? A lot of times when dogs are panting, that's a sign of stress. So it's just important to recognize, different stress signals in a dog. And I always tell people, if a toddler walks in and there's a dog, if you trust the dog enough, for example, you, Sharon, and there's a toddler there, have the toddler next to the dog, and then look for, have the toddler kind of stay calm if you can for a second. Or if the dog comes right up to the toddler and you're not sure, and it has a history of not being aggressive, sometimes you can let the toddler go to interact with it for a second. And what you do is you look for any signs of stress, right? So you kind of watch. And if after that brief interaction, the dog turns away, right? Or it licks its lips or it crouches down, then what that means is sort of a red light. Like you kind of look at that and go, you know what? We're going to take a pause, right? The dog actually showed some real symptoms of like, it didn't want more. Then there's kind of like a yellow light, we call it, where, the dog turns its body sideways. It licks its lips a little bit, but it didn't run away. There's different signs for example, for like, you can kind of see. And then there's an absolute green light where we kind of always know what that is. And that's like the dog keeps coming back for more. It's got a wiggly body. It's real loosey-goosey. Its tail's lower. And it's, it can be wagging, but the dog kind of comes back for more, if that makes sense. It circles back for more attention. And that's something, you can kind of keep an eye on, is like that first interaction to know if you should pull back and give the dog some more space.
That all does make a lot of sense. In fact, one of our dogs, some of the stress signs that you were mentioning, when little kids are in our swimming pool, he demonstrates a lot of those stress signals. Not the adults, but if the kids are, he's panting, he's nervous, he's shaking. I don't know if because he thinks it's a safety issue or what.
Well, here's the deal. And I'm just going to be honest. It doesn't really matter. We could think all day like, oh, it's this or it's because of this. In that situation, you say, this dog is uncomfortable, whether it's he's trying to save, even if it was for a reason like, oh, he wants to save them, or we think this, or we kind of like to anthropomorphize dogs a lot, like what they're thinking and feeling. And I always remind people, dogs don't really rationalize or moralize. So we got to really keep that in mind with dealing with dogs. When a dog is exhibiting stress signals and you learn body language and a little bit of dog psychology, like, well, the best thing to do is get that dog out of that situation, period.
Yeah. So that's what we do.
Yeah, good. And I'm so glad. Because a lot of times people will kind of keep trying to make it work. They're okay.
I did. Yeah, we for a while. We tried to see if he would calm down after a while, but every single time. So we know now it's like, okay, you're in the house.
I just commend you for recognizing that. And, in general, it's just really good to remember things like when a toddler starts crawling, number one, I just want to make this point. It's supervision and safety is always the number one. And we always say that and people are like, yeah. But people don't realize, they think, oh, even I thought I could leave the room with Carson sleeping in a bassinet or in his car seat and leave my golden in the room. And I trusted my golden pretty much, I thought, with my life. But that wasn't a smart decision the first week. I shouldn't have even put the dog in that position to have to make the decision. Should I go smell that thing? Should I sit here? So a good thing is to teach a dog early on to follow, like come with the mom out of the room, So I'll tell people about that. Teach the dog to go to place, obviously, but it's just good to have like that set reminder, especially bringing a newborn home, is we never leave a baby and a dog together, whether they're both asleep, one's asleep. Never do we do that unsupervised, ever. You just don't know, what could happen. And we do know there has been some horror stories, but we just want to make the dog as comfortable as possible when you're shaking up their whole world, especially with a new baby like that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Back to the red flag, yellow flag. If people do see those traits being exhibited and you said take a pause, what do you do beyond that? You take a pause, but then do you keep trying to reintroduce?
Not in that. What I would say is, it's hard to know exactly unless I was sitting there watching it, but I would say, yes, you could definitely try and reintroduce. But here's my thing that I go back to. And this is just such a dog training thing and not even a dog and kid thing, is something called neutrality. it's more important. Like when I come over and I'm working with people that have an older dog and a puppy, and they're like, how do we get these two to get along? Or what do we, it's all about neutrality. So teaching a dog and a toddler, or a dog, and you're introducing like any kind of situation and the dog is exhibiting those, it's always good to just think back to the whole thing of being neutral, teaching them to exist in the same space together, and they don't have to interact. So if a dog is uncomfortable, what we want to do is make the dog know that it can get away. It can make the decision to move away, right? So that's why I'm such a big proponent of crate training, place work, those kind of things. But if a toddler and a dog seem like they had a lot of yellow or red lights, what I would do is I would take a certain amount of days or weeks to have them spending some time together, but they don't have to be interacting. The dog can just be over on its place bed, or they can go out in the backyard together, and the dad has the dog playing the dog's favorite ball fetch, and the mom's pushing the kid on a swing or something like that, where they're interacting separately in the same space, and they're also just sometimes being neutral, they're
coexisting.
Yeah. You don't have to make them be best friends, right? The dog and the kid and the baby, I keep calling the kid, the dog and the human, the baby, going to be one of those things where within a couple of months, the dog's going to know no different. It's just going to be like, oh, this is just always how it was. Now, you get some dogs that they're just can't ever have them around they can't be trusted. And, or when the kids get mobile, right? And now they're sharing more of an intimate space together, just naturally, you can only do so much with baby gates and stuff like that without having a situation where it can get dangerous. So people always need to just really understand that the dog they have.
Right. Yeah. So change in general is hard for everybody, even as adults, right? We have a hard time accepting change. When a new child comes into play, how do you train dogs new boundaries? For example, our dogs have the reign of the house. They don't, they're not limited to one room, or they can't go into this room. But then when the baby's here, it happened today. I was watching my grandson. He was in the middle of his nap, and the dog pushed the door open into his room. And I was like, oh, shoot, do not wake that baby up.
Right. Well, here's the thing.
How do you teach the dogs, teach them new things that they're not accustomed to? Because this has been their home for the last several years.
It has, right. And so, obviously, it's so important that people, before they bring the baby home, if possible, right? We don't always have the forethought to do this, but people start to really play out scenarios in their head. Like, okay, I'm going to be doing this with the baby. I'm going to be sitting on the couch feeding the baby, and the dog's usually up on the couch with me every day. So they've got to change that if at all possible before, or they've got to get a trainer over there and work with the parents, because it really is 99% human training when I come over, right? Like, obviously I'm working with the dog, but I'm showing the human, like, this is what you've got to change. You've got to learn that. What do you have to do differently to teach this dog some boundaries, right? You might have to step into the dog where you never had to do that and teach the dog to back up. You may have to teach the dog there's certain areas not to go into, but you've got to know how to address it when the dog breaks boundaries, right? You've got to know that you should step into the dog with body pressure. Some dogs, you've really got to use the crate. You've got to limit their space, right? When they're out of the crate, they might need to be on tethers sometimes. So that's a good thing to teach a dog before the baby comes home. Like, hey, every night when we're watching TV between 6 and 8, you're either in your crate, you're doing a place training session, we're outside playing, or you're on a tether chewing a bone. So that way you're limiting their choices, right? And they're used to that. It's not so shocking when the baby comes home. So as far as when it's already happening, right, Angela, like it's already, all this stuff's happening. I would say maybe have a trainer come over and show you ways that you could address it. But usually when dogs have had that kind of freedom and the people haven't been really good leaders from the beginning, then what happens is, the dogs don't have any concept that they have to have any respect for the humans. They're allowed to jump on the couch when they want. They're allowed to come in the kitchen. They're allowed to shove a toy in your face. So all that stuff is just, training a dog to have some spatial boundaries. It's not hard to teach a dog boundaries in a home. It's actually one of the easiest things I think to teach.
It's teaching the parents how to stay
enforce it. Exactly.
Be disciplined. So, yeah.
Like, I'll give you an example. Like, if you didn't want the dog in a certain area of the house. The dog should be in the main living area of a house, right? When you're raising kids and whatever. They don't need to be in bathrooms and bedrooms. That's our intimate living space. Why does a dog need to follow you to the bathroom and push the door open and come in? Why does a dog need to go in the bedroom? I'm not saying never, right?
Oh my
I'm
God.
like,
Do your
my
dogs
dog's
see
allowed
you
to
pee
come.
every day? Because mine do. They just barge right in.
Augie barges
Augie,
through the door, looks
like-
at me, and walks out.
Yeah.
Right. But what Augie and Goose are allowed to do and our dogs are different because I also don't have babies right now. So it does make a difference, you know, where you're at in life stages with the dog.
It's not a lost cause. They can't
No,
be
oh my
retrained.
gosh.
They can learn new boundaries and
No,
things like
So
that.
quickly. I mean, even just you know, the example with the door, you know, you can head the dog like today, before the dog got to the bedroom door, you could have stepped in front of the dog and said, and you could have stepped into the dog with body pressure and just said, hey, nope, out, and started walking into the dog. So it backed up, not mean, but just gently with your body, and gave the dog another idea of something to do. Like, hey, go get on your bed.
So my breakaway from constantly watching the baby, you're saying I have to constantly watch the dog?
I know. And no, if you're coming over, I mean, this is my thing. If you're coming over to watch a baby, and you're only there for 2 or 3 hours, right? Those dogs should have been exercised by someone else before you got there, and they should be in their crates while you're there. That's what I would do if it was
All
my
right,
mom.
that'll be the new rule for my
Dog's
son-in-law. Run the dog at 6 a.m.
Run the dog and then put him in the crate for a little bit. It doesn't mean you can't get the dog out later, right? But
yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
A lot.
Yeah, no, lots of great info. Well, before we run out of time, I think it would be super helpful for all of our listeners to hear, what do you recommend just teaching children in general about approaching dogs?
One of the biggest things I get is sometimes, you know, obviously I think kids should ask before they pet dogs. The other thing is kids should never put their face in dogs' faces. They should never try and sit on or hug or squeeze dogs. When a dog becomes hugged or squeezed, that sort of simulates like kind of like a primitive, like you're about to be eaten. Squeezing to a dog doesn't feel good, but kids tend to want to go up and squeeze a dog. They tend to want to go up and, you know, put their hands in their face. I think it's really good to teach kids, you know, if they're allowed to pet a dog, that the kid should kind of come up, stand there quietly. And then if you kind of do that little consent test, if it looks like the dog is like good body language, you know, the child learns to hold still for a second and just let the dog take the child in for a second. And then if the dog's body language looks good, then they're allowed, the child can reach out and pet the dog. It's always good that they try and reach out and pet the dog somewhere other than the face, the back of the head, the back. I think that's a really good thing to teach kids. The other thing too is sometimes a hand reaching over a dog's head is not good, like to get to the back of the head or the back. So sometimes to come underhanded is good. The other thing too is, this is kind of hard to tell kids not to do, but the direct eye contact with dogs isn't really good. So if the dog's already nervous and you're staring at them and now you're touching them, and you know what I mean? It can take some of the pressure off a dog if you're not staring at them.
Okay, well, certainly you can teach older kids, just tell them not to stare a dog in its eyes.
Yeah, we really struggle with my 1-year-old grandson. He climbs on the family dog, who's a chocolate. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I put this on Instagram. You can ask Sharon. She's probably seen it. I have put pictures of kids on top of dogs. And I will tell you that is, you never let a child climb on top of a dog ever.
Yeah. So we're struggling with it. We're constantly taking him off of her.
Yes.
She's so kind. She's so loving.
Loves the dog. Yeah.
It happened with
The dog is loving.
The dog is loving. Yeah. It happened with my kids when they were younger. We had a golden.
Me too. It happened with my own kids, you guys. So I totally get
they'd fall asleep with them, like laying on them. And, you know, it is hard because it does look cute, like you said earlier in the episode. Right. But it is the hardest thing. And it sounds like it's pretty important to not do.
It's really important not to lean on dogs for them to squeeze. But what's really good to teach a kid is how to do an interactive game. Like, because I think I can't remember what age, but about 1 or 2, you can kind of put a ball in a little kid's hand, and kind of, you might have to help them, but throw the ball and then the dog goes and gets it and then they start laughing. Or you're asking the dog to do some behaviors like sit, speak. You throw a treat up and the dog catches it in the air, and then you have the toddler with you on your lap, and the toddler's watching all this and So teaching kids to interact with dogs the right way by giving them kind of a job, like, hey, throw the ball for the dog, teaching them to interact with the dog, that it's not always space invasion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Angela brought up a good question when we were chatting earlier, but is there a simple answer to preventing dogs from chewing the baby's toys?
It's a little hard. I have a lot of households I go into, and there can be kids' toys all over the ground, and the dog doesn't touch them because the parents have gone up to the dog right before it got to the toy and said, you know what I mean? They've corrected the dog and said, nah, and then they've showed the dog, like, over here, come over here in this room, and I have something over here for you.
Okay.
And kids sometimes will correct the dog. They'll start screaming and be like, don't touch my dog. And then the dog is like, oh, okay. But
Okay.
that's not an easy one. That's working with the dog a little bit daily and teaching the dog what it is allowed and not allowed to come up to.
So the same thing, though, it's setting boundaries.
Boundaries, and you can put a leash on a dog to kind of help with that. Leashes really help with boundaries. So
it is interesting because we have the 3 dogs when they're here, they did a really good job. Like the first 9 months, they'd smell the toy and I think they knew, okay, this is the baby's toy. But now all of a sudden I'm finding they're sneaking these toys and they're getting destroyed. So I don't know what happened.
You got to remember, dogs are opportunistic, right?
Yeah,
so
I guess we're giving them too many
bad.
Opportunities. You're probably right.
But they're kind of going to do what serves their needs the quickest and the easiest and makes them the happiest. A lot of times when dogs start tearing up stuff just anyway, in general, and they've never torn anything up, they start getting into food or bread, or my dog was getting into bread for a while years ago. It means the dog's needs aren't being met. Usually the dogs are experiencing some type of stress, and not always, but a lot of times their physical or mental or both needs aren't being met. So they're not getting enough mental stimulation, meaning they didn't get a good 20-minute walk or run and come home and go to place and have to sit in place for 15 minutes. Because believe it or not, that's also burning a lot of mental calories, having to go to your place and stay there. And it's a job. It's also breed specific. Some breeds need more jobs than others. A lot of working breeds like shepherds, Australian shepherds, dogs that are bred for jobs. We just get so busy when we have kids, and it's all of us. It was including myself, that sometimes the dogs are the last on the list to get their needs met. And they are animals, right? I'm not saying humans shouldn't take priority, but if you know that a lot of times a dog just getting enough, a good run and to go play ball in the yard for 10 minutes when they get home from the run, and then they just lay down, get a drink of water, and they're out, right? But if the dog doesn't get that, then they're off trying to find something to do to fulfill a need that didn't get met.
Speaking of breeds, Nicole, are there any specific breeds that you do know are more conducive to being around young kids?
All I can say is it's really more about temperament. The tried and true breeds that I see a lot that are good family dogs are a lot of labs or lab mixes. I see a lot of Goldens. Boxers tend to be really good family dogs. But also I could name some breeds that you wouldn't think would be good family dogs that I've seen in the last month because of the temperament, right? They just had an amazing temperament. So it's a combination of genetics in a dog, and it's also a combination of biology and environmental. But all dogs have needs that need to be met. And so the thing is even if you have a difficult dog that has more needs, if you've gone out and let's say you have an Australian Shepherd and it wants to chase the kids, well, you can't take out the herding instinct, but what you can do is teach the dog to chase a lure or a flirt pole, right? You can get that urge fulfilled, but then at the same time train them. There's boundaries with the kids.
Well, I think we're almost out of time. So we would love it if we could end with a funny dog sitting story or something unique you've experienced.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of a funny I'm always nervous to tell something because I'm like, what if someone hears this and they think that that's them? I'll tell you a funny story. Hopefully they never know I'm talking about them. This is really funny. This was years ago, so I think I'm good. Years and years ago, it was an older guy, and he was so sweet, but he went into the hospital, and I can't remember what it was for, but it wasn't like he wasn't going to die or anything, right? I think he got the flu or something. Well, he went to the hospital, and his wife couldn't pick up the dog, and he sent me a video from his hospital bed. And it was like this, it was really sweet though, but it was really funny. And I kept the video for years, and it was him telling the dog that if he doesn't make it, like if he doesn't come out of this alive.
Oh, this is sad, Nicole.
But it was so funny because he wasn't that sick, and his wife wife was making fun of him calling me, and she was like, I don't know what he's doing. This is crazy. She's like, he's fine. And then, so she's calling me on one end, and then on the other end, he's sending me these emotional videos that I'm supposed to play for the dog. And it's like, oh my God. So I've had some really funny stuff happen like that. So
that's funny.
Very dramatic.
I know. Well, you know how men are when they get sick.
I was going to say.
Yes, it is a lot like that. I think that was it. But anyway,
drama
of course
comes out.
Yeah.
Of course he was fine. And I wanted to be like, can I buy the rights to this funny story that you're telling the dog? Dad's going to be there. I love you. It was so funny.
No offense to the men listeners out
there.
No. Sometimes we hear your babies.
Well, the wife thought he was. Let me tell you that. She was laughing at him.
Yeah, that's funny.
I'm sure. Well, Nicole does do a lot of virtual training for anyone out of the area, and she is in the San Diego for in-person training. So we will put all of her information on our website. But can you share where people can find you, Nicole?
One of the best ways to reach out to me is like on my Instagram to message me, and that's SD, like San Diego Puppy Coach. Another way to call, I know it's so simple, but just I respond to texts really quickly, to call me, 619-254-7397. I have a Facebook and I get messages through there. And I also have an email, which is Nicole at San Diego Puppy Coach.
And make sure to follow Nicole on Instagram. Your Instagram is really good with dog training tips and lots of good info.
Thank you. And it was so nice to meet you, Angela.
Oh, the pleasure was mine. This was fun.
And if you two ever have another topic, like bringing home a new puppy with a new family and stuff, we could definitely chat about lots of other subjects. So let me know.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. Also follow us on Instagram at Working Grandmas Podcast, on Facebook at The Grand Balance, a Working Grandmas Podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Working Grandmas. You can also email us at info@workinggrandmas.com or message us through any of our social media platforms.